Discover the incredible moment when a police dog transformed an old man's fate. You won't believe what happened next. Charlie Thompson sat on the small, weathered porch of his bungalow, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the fading paint. The vegetables in his garden bore witness to his neglect, abandoned dreams left to wither in the dirt. Each day passed in a blur, heavy with memories of his wife's laughter that seemed to linger like an echo in the empty rooms of their home. 2 years since she'd succumbed to that relentless disease, and Charlie had become a ghost among the living invisible amidst Maplewood's hustle. "Charlie, come on down," shouted his neighbor Tom from across the street, waving enthusiastically. There was something in Tom's voice that tugged at him, and for a moment, Charlie felt the pull of companionship, a pang he hadn't experienced in ages. With a sigh, he rose, every joint creaking with protest like the old wooden floorboards beneath his feet. "What's so important?" he grumbled, half-heartedly hoping it would be dismissed. But when Tom mentioned the police K9 event at the park, persistence broke through Charlie's reluctance. Ideal or not, he felt an obligation, a tether, however fragile, to the world beyond his lonely garden. As the sun dipped lower, Charlie shuffled to the park, burdened by uncertainty that felt almost familiar. Once an integral part of the town, he now moved like a distant memory among the crowd, where laughter and excitement filled the air. The sight of the thrumming community felt bittersweet, a world he'd touched but couldn't grasp. The local police department, with its uniforms and shiny patrol cars, served as a stark reminder of the life buzzing around him, while he remained stagnant, anchored by fear and the weight of the past. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The crowd watched the K9. Max burst forth, a ball of energy with purpose as he raced through obedience drills. Charlie remained on the periphery, anxiety building within him like a pressure cooker. When Max, curious and spirited, bounded toward him, Charlie hesitated. There was a heat in the dog's eyes that mirrored the warmth he'd lost. Just as suddenly, the air shifted. Chaos erupted as Max slipped from his handler's hold, racing off, igniting a frantic search. Charlie's heart pounded as shouts filled the air. He felt invisible once more, a bystander to a world spinning too fast, but a strange urgency bubbled up within him. Moments stretched into a suffocating silence. What if they never found him? What if Max was gone just like everything else he loved? Could he dare to step away from the shadows? His breath quickened as the idea struck. He couldn't remain on the sidelines any longer. There was a chance within him. The abandoned building at the town's edge reminded him of what he had been, forgotten, shuttered. He weighed the burden of risk against the flicker of hope. Could he act? A few fragmented thoughts swirled in his mind. What if it's too late? But the notion of being needed for once held a gravity that pulled him closer. As he moved toward the building, a soft whimper beckoned him closer, each step echoing his fight against the isolation of his own life. Would this moment lead to salvation or despair? In that heavy air, Charlie stood at the edge of change, poised between trepidation and a surge of determination. Charlie moved forward with hesitant conviction, his heart thundering in synchronization with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. Each step toward the abandoned building weighed heavier than the last, a struggle against his own ingrained reluctance. The faint whimper that had captured his attention came again, more pronounced, resonating like a bell calling him to action. Inside the desolate structure, shadows danced menacingly, shrouding remnants of a life once vibrant. Cobwebs lined the corners, a testament to neglect. But Charlie could feel a stirring, deep within him, a yearning to reclaim a piece of himself, lost in grief. The memory of his wife brushed against him like a gentle breeze, and he took a deep breath, letting her courage fortify his resolve. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he spotted Max cowering in the corner, his expressive brown eyes wide with both fear and relief. The moment their gazes locked, Something clicked within Charlie, a primal connection sparked by vulnerability and recognition. This dog, once as exuberant as the world itself, was now an embodiment of his own sense of abandonment. "Hey, buddy," Charlie whispered, kneeling down cautiously, careful not to startle the trembling creature. His heart softened. This pitch of fragility was familiar, reflecting the depths of his solitude. What if he could step in? What if he could offer comfort? Max responded by inching closer, bravery overcoming terror. Charlie's hand extended, brushing against Max's velvety fur, and an electric warmth coursed through him. It was an echo of trust, an unraveling of the hermetic shell he had cocooned himself in. In that intimate moment, the weight of his isolation began to lift. "Let's get you out of here," he murmured, his voice steady. Grasping the dog's collar with intent, he guided Max gently back toward the door. It felt profoundly right. Just as he crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. The outside world emerged, vibrant and alive. The crowds that had felt so distant a moment ago now seemed welcoming. Charlie clasped Max's leash tightly, suddenly aware of a tangible purpose swelling within him. He belonged here, outside the shadows. They walked through the park together, Charlie keeping a steady pace as Max explored the grass, his spirit reigniting like the sun breaking through clouds. For each joyful leap Max took, something shifted within Charlie. He felt a flicker of excitement that had been long abandoned. His subsequent laughter tangled with that of the children racing by, unearthing a piece of him that had been buried under layers of sorrow. "Charlie!" Tom called from across the park, his face lighting up with genuine surprise as he approached. "You found him!" "Yes, I did," Charlie replied, the pride in his voice foreign yet exhilarating. "I guess we both needed a little rescue today." The acknowledgement felt profound, an initiatory step back into the existence he'd all but forfeited. As they settled onto a bench, Charlie, still learning to uncoil from his past, and Max, paws resting beside him, a surge of energy rippled through him. Maybe this wasn't just a fleeting encounter. Perhaps it was a pivotal turning point. But beneath this newfound connection lingered an unsettling reality. Could he maintain this momentum? What awaited him beyond this moment? The familiar shadow of doubt crept in, demanding to know if he truly had the strength to face more than just the ghosts of the past. The laughter continued around him, a vibrant tapestry of life he yearned to reclaim. Yet the path ahead remained uncertain, brimming with both hope and apprehension. Could he rise above the shackles of his grief and thrust himself into a life infused with purpose and connection? In that pregnant silence, burdened by unanswered questions, Charlie felt the weight of potential pressing gently against him. Would this shift in fate lead him to a future restored, or plunge him back into despair? The moment crackled with possibility, framing the delicate balance between fear and courage. And as he gazed into Max's amber eyes, the enormity of the challenge before him crystallized. Soon, he would confront not just the remnants of his past, but the dawning realization that to truly live again, he would need to let go of the very fear that had kept him tethered to the darkness. He wondered, was he ready to take that leap into the light? Max's presence transformed the way Charlie perceived the world around him. The vibrant colors of the park felt brighter, the sounds of laughter appeared fuller, and even the air seemed to offer a gentle reassurance. As they strolled, Charlie could feel the warmth of the sun on his face, invigorating him, a stark contrast to the chill that had long settled in his heart. Soon after Tom left, Charlie made his way to a nearby coffee stand, having realized he hadn't eaten since breakfast. With Max by his side, he ordered a steaming cup of coffee and a muffin. The sweet aroma wafted into the air, fading the lingering scent of neglect that had surrounded him moments before. He took a seat at one of the weathered wooden tables, watching Max sniff curiously at the ground, blissfully unaware of all he had endured. Charlie took a sip of the coffee, its warmth seeping through him, bringing forth a wave of clarity. Perhaps it was time to embrace this moment, to absorb the lessons embedded within it. The simple joy of caring for another being stirred something deep within him, What if nurturing this connection with Max could lead him back to reclaiming his own lost joys? As he watched the dog, another realization struck. He had been alone, spiraling within a world colored only by loss and despair. But with Max at his side, a new kind of hope began to take root. A hope not just for companionship, but an undercurrent of responsibility. Could he transform his grief into strength to create a better life for both of them? A distant bark caught his attention, and he snapped back to reality as a trio of dogs bounded across the open area. The sight startled Max momentarily, but soon enough, curiosity overcame his initial fear. He stood with erect ears, tail wagging, ready to engage with this world that had always seemed so terrifying. "Easy there, buddy," Charlie said softly, knowing he needed to foster this budding bravery. Something in his voice seemed to resonate with Max, who began to wag his tail vigorously. This gave Charlie the courage to rise from his chair and stroll with Max toward the other dogs. As they approached, Charlie felt his heart race, not just with fear, but with something akin to excitement. He found himself wondering if he too could step beyond his fears, confront the uncertainty, and discover new layers of personal growth. As they mingled, Charlie's focus shifted, looking for signs of guidance from the world around him. Strangely enough, he began to comprehend the delicate balance of vulnerability and strength. Watching Max interact with the other dogs, he felt his own emotional barriers begin to crack. This was a pivotal moment, pushing him towards personal confrontation. Would he allow the past to continue to limit him, or would he take proactive steps toward healing? Suddenly, an incident occurred. A dog aggressively barked at Max, creating an electric tension in the air. The moment felt frozen for Charlie as he instinctively took a protective step forward. His heart thundered in his chest. This was the moment he would rise or fall back into his past. "Hey, easy!" Charlie shouted, his tone firm. The uncertainty evaporated, revealing an inner strength he hadn't known he possessed. Max's body tensed beside him, but Charlie's presence seemed to imbue him with courage. Together, they confronted the situation, a united front against fear. As the tension dissolved, an unexpected realization anchored Charlie's heart. He was capable of both advocacy and protection, not only for Max, but for himself. A substantial choice loomed before him. He could return to his old habit of retreating into his shell, or begin to forge a new path, empowered by connections. Perhaps even engage with others in the park, or search for a local dog training course to explore deeper interactions with Max. In that moment of clarity, Charlie felt the urge to seize this knowledge. He could venture into the unknown with Max as his guide. The future, teeming with potential, beckoned to him. But as they began to walk home, enthusiasm tempered by caution seeped into his mind. Could he truly reshape his life, challenge personal wounds, and embrace the light? Charlie pondered these questions, their weight mingling with the thrill of possibility. The true test lay ahead. Would he have the courage to face this emerging path, one filled with uncertainty as well as opportunity? The next morning, a burning determination flared within Charlie as he woke up. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. He stretched, feeling the subtle tension in his muscles, a reminder of the energy sparked by the previous day's encounters. Max, lounging lazily at his feet, stretched too, yawning big enough to showcase his canine's version of optimism. Charlie glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall, marking the days since his unsteady new beginning. Today, he decided, was the day he would embark on a quest for knowledge. Engaging with others and signing up for a dog training course was no longer a distant dream, but a palpable mission. Max deserved the best, and so did he. Feeling uncharacteristically bold, Charlie grabbed his phone and searched for nearby dog training classes. The screen glowed in front of him, highlighting a plethora of options. But one stood out, a course advertised as Building Relationships Through Training, Dog and Owner Bonding. That was it. He could nurture not just Max's potential, but also his own. Excitement melded with fear as he pressed a button to register. A confirmation email flashed across the screen, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the stirrings of hope in his chest. Later, as he and Max navigated through the neighborhood on their morning walk, Charlie's mind oscillated between what was ahead and the familiar shadows of doubt. He spotted a group of dog owners at a nearby park, exchanging tips and laughter, their dogs frolicking like carefree beings. He hesitated, his insecurities gnawing at him. Would they accept him? But catching a glimpse of Max, tail wagging, energy abounding, ignited the flicker of courage he had cultivated within. It was more than just fear of others. It was formidable fear of stepping outside his comfort zone. Taking a deep breath, he approached the group. "Hey there," he managed, his voice steadier than he felt. The warm greeting engulfed him, their smiles and nods welcoming rather than scrutinizing. It was heartening to feel the ripple of acceptance, each exchange somewhat dissolving his misgivings. Charlie watched as Max and the other dogs began to interact, mirroring the sides of himself he often kept hidden, playful, eager, and open. Conversations flowed, confidence replaced doubt, and inspirations emerged. One owner, a middle-aged woman named Laura, shared insights on handling different dog behaviors, suddenly igniting Charlie's thirst for knowledge. The path to personal development was being paved through these connections, thoughts coalescing into a strategy for his immediate future. "Have you considered a local agility class?" Laura asked, her interest in Max apparent. "It's not just fun for dogs. They build so much confidence, and so do their owners." An idea sparked in Charlie, a chance to explore not just the training techniques, but also an arena in which he could unearth potential he thought had long vanished from his life. All the while, Max leaped and bounded, relishing the attention, which inspired Charlie. Leaving the park that day felt monumental. Each step felt like he was shedding the past, stripping away layers of self-doubt. The shadows that had once confined him faded somewhat, chased away by the illuminating warmth of connection and support. He returned home, invigorated, already contemplating the boundaries he'd dare to stretch next. But as he opened his email that evening, the weight of future responsibilities settled on his shoulders. Amid confirmations for the dog training classes, there lay a message marked urgent, a notification regarding some unresolved matters tied to his late father. Confrontation lurked around the corner, waiting to pull him into a different kind of challenge. Could he face the ghosts of his past while he embraced this newfound journey? The tightness in his chest hinted that the struggle was far from over. The moment of truth was on the horizon, and unresolved emotions loomed darkly, ready to test his resolve. Would he be able to face the specter of his father's legacy while simultaneously stepping into this fresh, hopeful territory? The contrast between personal growth and the shadows of the past had begun a war of wills within him, and he could only hope that he would be equipped to handle both. The weight of the email loomed large in Charlie's mind, overshadowing the exhilaration he had felt earlier. He sat in silence with Max curled beside him, the dog's contented sigh breaking the stillness but failing to ease the knot forming in Charlie's stomach. The connection he had built with the other dog owners felt fragile in comparison to the impenetrable barrier his father's unresolved legacy presented. With resolve stealing his demeanor, Charlie opened the email. It detailed an upcoming hearing regarding the estate, not just financial matters, but also the unfinished business of his father's life that Charlie had never been prepared to confront. Each word felt as if it bore down on his chest, insisting he engage with memories he thought he could avoid. Doubts flooded in. Was he truly ready to take this on? He stood up abruptly, feeling restless, and grabbed Max's leash. "Come on, buddy," he muttered. The cool evening air greeted them as they stepped out into the neighborhood. Walking helped, a chance to channel the escalating anxiety into something tangible. Max trotted alongside, blissfully unaware, his presence a comforting reminder of the newfound path Charlie had begun to tread. As they wandered, Charlie reflected on the conversation with Laura. The thought of agility classes stirred something positive within him. He needed to embrace every opportunity that would build his confidence, not just with training Max, but also in facing whatever awaited him regarding his father. Maybe he could approach the upcoming meeting from a place of strength that began with this commitment to personal growth. When they returned home, Charlie took out his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating his determined expression. He could see his father's name in the on-screen document. It was daunting, yet inexplicably liberating. As he scrolled through the details, he felt the simmering determination boiling over. He wasn't just a son unmoored by grief. He was a person with ambitions for the future. The dog training classes and eventually agility courses would be a cornerstone of his evolution. Every lesson learned with Max would forge a new commitment to communicate better, to show up fully, not just in dog training, but in life. He could visualize himself standing strong among the other pet owners, asserting his place, unafraid of the judgment that always felt so palpable. For every moment spent training Max, he could flip the narrative. Those moments were reflections of his growth. But the estate, how could he possibly keep the two worlds separate? The deeper Charlie sank into planning his training schedule, the more the edges of that other world intruded. The passion to transform his relationship with Max could help, rainbows unfurling over shadows. Yet the looming legal proceedings demanded significant mental space, threatening to pull him under. Emboldened by a rush of adrenaline, Charlie began jotting down techniques that had inspired him during the park visit. His handwriting switched from hesitant to confident as he realized how intertwined training with Max had become, with the healing he hadn't sought, but desperately needed. Suddenly, an idea struck him, an approach to the hearing that was his own. If he could tackle the obstacles in his path with the same tenacity he displayed in training Max, then perhaps the judgment that awaited him wouldn't feel so insurmountable. But could he keep that determination steady when faced with the raw emotions tied to his father? As Charlie closed his laptop, a mix of excitement and trepidation bubbled within him. New challenges awaited, and they demanded a readiness he was not yet entirely sure he possessed. Yet beneath the uncertainty lay the flicker of hope, the realization that each decision, each training session, would shape not only his future with Max but the man he was destined to become. And as night settled outside, painting the world in shadows, Charlie paused, his heart racing. The next day would bring clarity, or perhaps turmoil, concerning his father's legacy. He needed to reconcile the man he had been with the man he aspired to be, a daunting realization that ignited a new fear within him. The time had come to face not just the fading echoes of his father's life, but the haunting specter cloaked in the promise of newfound strength. The door to that confrontation loomed larger by the second, and as Charlie's breath hitched, he understood his resolve was about to be put to the ultimate test. Would he emerge stronger, or fall back into the shadows that felt so familiar? Charlie awoke early, the muffled light of dawn filtering through his blinds. The anticipation of the day ahead pulsed in his veins, mingling with an undercurrent of dread. He was standing on the precipice, with a single leap standing between the remnants of his past and the possibility of a new beginning. Max nuzzled closer, reading his mood and offering quiet companionship. After a morning routine that felt scripted, Charlie donned a simple blue shirt and jeans. Comfort, not style, was the object. Each button fastened felt like a tiny victory, a step in the right direction, amplifying a sense of purpose he'd been grasping onto since the decision to confront his father's legacy. He fed Max, his movements deliberate, scheduling their usual morning walk before plunging into the unknown. As they set out together, the crisp air stirred something in him. Charlie felt the weight of the day pressing down on his shoulders, but as he inhaled deeply, he envisioned Max bounding through the agility course he'd been planning. This thought lit a fire inside him. Training with Max was not just a diversion, it was the antidote to the fear paralyzing him. If he could succeed in these small, meaningful victories, perhaps tackling his father's affairs wouldn't feel so daunting. While crossing the park, Charlie replayed the strategies he had developed for their agility training. He wanted to teach Max not only commands, but also to connect with him in a language that transcended words. With every sit, stay, and come, he was building trust, between them and eventually, with himself. Each command was another brick laid in the foundation of his self-assurance, and each successful response from Max felt like a stamp of approval on his evolving capabilities. But doubt crept in again, interjecting harshly with reminders of the upcoming hearing. The looming confrontation with the legacy felt insurmountable at times. He recognized that this dual existence, dog trainer and son, would require a balance he hadn't yet found. Training a dog was far more quantifiable than untangling family affairs imbued with emotion and unresolved questions. Deciding to focus on what he could control, Charlie planned a training session at the park later that day, while he would simultaneously indulge in quiet preparation for the hearing. Could he, perhaps, replicate the consistency and discipline he had honed with Max in that daunting context? Back at home, with Max playing on the floor, Charlie pulled out his laptop. Instead of diving immediately into the chaos of financial documents, he opened a blank page to outline his goals. The intersection of his life existed in the tension between the ethics of handling his father's legacy and the embrace of a new passion that blossomed around him. He crafted notes, merging ideas of leadership and accountability that extended beyond dog training and into the world he feared confronting. Amidst brainstorming, he recalled a phrase that Laura had shared during one of their conversations about dogs. "The bond defines the success." It clicked. Charlie had been searching for his identity within the shadows of his father's expectations, but perhaps success lay within redefining what those bonds meant. With renewed vigor, he typed out strategies not just for agility classes, but reflections on the kind of son he wanted to be, the kind of confrontation he wished for himself, one rooted in honesty, clarity, and respect for his father's memory, as complicated as it was. Time slipped by, and soon he felt a sense of accomplishment working in tandem with swelling anxiety. As Charlie glanced at the clock, the weight of the hearing barreled back into focus, reminding him that this was merely a rehearsal for the unpredictability he would face. "Ready, Max?" Charlie said, his voice steady as he stared into his dog's trusting eyes. The question wasn't just for Max, but for himself too. As they made their way to the door, the determined light in Charlie's eyes met his own reflection in the window. Was he truly prepared for the challenges ahead? And as they stepped outside, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. The hearing loomed with the potential for clarity, yet it also harbored uncertainties that felt almost crippling. Would he echo the legacy of his father, or would he carve a path defined under his own terms? Max sensed the shift in Charlie's energy, and in that moment, staring at the horizon, the question hung heavy. How much would he allow the past to dictate his future? As they walked, Charlie felt every step echo the weight of his impending responsibilities. The park was alive with early morning sound, the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, and the distant yapping of other dogs. Each noise cut through the stillness that surrounded his thoughts, reminding him that life moved on, regardless of his internal turmoil. The warmth of the sun began to fill the air, and he embraced it like a nurturing hug, using it to shake off the chill of fear that clung tightly to him. He guided Max towards a clearing, excited to put into practice the strategies he had painstakingly devised. More than a rigorous training session, this time represented a journey, a way to reinforce his own skills alongside his dog's. Engaging Max in motion, he threw a frisbee, watching the dog's eyes narrow with focus. The simplicity of the chase captivated Charlie, offering a momentary escape from the complexity of his worries. "All right, buddy, let's show them what we can do," he said, practicing the commands with crisp certainty. "Sit, stay, come." Each command was met with a rapid response, each successful execution by Max filling Charlie with a quiet confidence. He pondered how much this activity paralleled what he needed to confront about his father. Just like working with Max, navigating familial expectations required patience, repetition, and an unyielding belief in the bond they shared. In the flurry of training, Charlie stumbled upon a startling realization. He had been viewing his relationship with his father through a lens fogged by resentment. This was more than just following in paternal footsteps. It was about establishing his unique identity in contrast to the legacy. Perhaps he could honor those aspects of his father he cherished while discarding the burdens. The breakthroughs were subtle, but genuine. With every successful command, he began to draft an outline of his strategy for the hearing. He envisioned himself standing firm, asserting his will while acknowledging his father's influence. Rather than wrestling with the shadow of disappointment, he would step forward carrying the light of legacy, ready to redefine what that meant on his own terms. As the midday sun climbed higher, casting long shadows on the grass, Charlie paused to catch his breath. He knelt beside Max, who had flopped down in the cool patch of earth, panting with joy after their vigorous session. Charlie scratched between Max's ears, reflecting on what he had achieved in training. The bond they nurtured transcended commands. It was a mutual journey of discovery. Suddenly, a sharp bark interrupted his reverie. The unruly barking belonged to a golden retriever as it sprinted past, pulling its owner along with surprising force. The woman, an unassuming figure in casual attire, struggled to keep up, her expression teetering between amusement and exasperation. "Come back here," she called, but the dog was consumed by the thrill of freedom. Charlie chuckled at the scene, yet it sparked a deeper thought. The retrieval and companionship that Max showed were not merely about obedience, but about connecting in the chaos, much like he needed to do within his family disputes. Charlie's eyes drifted back to the park, where the sunlight danced among the trees, illuminating paths both literal and metaphorical. With clarity strengthening in his mind, he decided to sketch out his approach for the hearing right there on the grass. Pulling out his notebook, he bullet-pointed his feelings about confronting his father's intentions while weaving in his aspirations for forging his own narrative. Suddenly, it all felt less intimidating, and more like a mission worthy of his new purpose, embracing both the challenge and possibility ahead. As he closed the notebook, the thrill of commitment surged within him. He flicked a glance at Max, whose bright eyes seemed to mirror that same determination. Yet, just as he was about to rise, a skirmish erupted from the far end of the park, where a group of men stood heatedly arguing, a cacophony of raised voices and threats that shattered the gentle ambiance Charlie found inside himself. His heart raced. This was a reminder of the chaos he would soon face in real life, and it struck a nerve, lacing his thoughts with a steely resolve. Would this confrontation mirror the fragility of trust he had built with Max, or would it spiral into the emotional chaos he desperately sought to avoid? Charlie quickly rose, gripping the notebook tightly in one hand, ready to move forward. The question loomed larger than life. Could he channel the perseverance he nurtured in the park into personal conflict, or would he crumble under the weight of legacy? And as they headed back toward the entrance of the park, the distant shouts of men bled into Charlie's thoughts. The hearing would not just be a confrontation. It could unravel everything he was just beginning to understand about his father's world and his own emerging identity. Charlie stepped away from the park, his breath still mingling with the fading sound of the argument behind him. The chatter of families enjoying the day felt distant now, as if he were standing at the edge of a world he once knew, but was rapidly leaving behind. Each step away from the park seemed to challenge him to reconcile the unfolding drama in his life with the clarity he felt during his time with Max. Walking alongside his dog, Charlie felt the tension build within him. The hearing loomed closer, echoing like the grating voices he had just heard. Could he truly assert himself against the legacy of his father? And more importantly, could he confront the emotional complexities that came with that legacy? As they made their way home, urgency ignited his focus. He replayed his thoughts, strategizing under his breath, calculating how he would insist on being heard. This wasn't merely about defending a position, it was about forging a new pathway, defining who he wanted to be outside of his father's shadow. The clarity hit him again. The very act of standing up against his father's expectations would be his first significant step towards independence. Inside the quiet of his apartment, Charlie removed his shoes and sank into the warmth of the wooden floor, moving instinctively to sit cross-legged, Max flopping beside him, resting his head on Charlie's knee, mirroring the bond they shared. He reached for his notebook again, flipping through the pages filled with diagrams and notes, each word meticulously carved to piece together his thoughts. This project was intricate, filled with ambitions that stretched far beyond the immediate event on the horizon. Charlie's pen glided over the paper, sketching new ideas about how to frame his argument. Rather than focusing solely on the past, he wanted to illustrate compatibility with the future, a blend of appreciation and assertion. He wrote about how to voice his own narrative, to advocate for himself in a clear, assertive manner while revealing the vulnerability that had kept him muted for so long. As the minutes passed, Charlie remained in this productive trance, contemplating the uncomfortable crossroads he faced. Taking a deep breath, he began writing about his feelings toward his father, understanding that this was not just an external battle. It was an internal struggle, too. In that moment, a revelation struck him. He needed to acknowledge not just his father's role in shaping his identity, but also the ideal of forgiveness. What if he approached the hearing not only as a confrontation, but as a chance for reconciliation? Perhaps if he composed himself with respect toward his father's contributions, he could not only express his desire for independence, but also start to heal the fractures of their relationship. This insight brought a swell of determination. Maybe he could reshape the narrative without burning the bridges behind him. Charlie paused, staring at the paper, the ink now a visible representation of his metamorphosis. Emerging from the chrysalis of fear, he prepared to spread his wings. But all at once the fleeting calm of his revelation was overtaken by the weight of reality. The very fear he'd tried to quell, bubbling to the surface again. Could he truly engage in this act of forgiveness? Would his father reject it? Or worse, undermine his progress? As more questions swarmed his thoughts, he felt Max nudge his leg, pulling him from spiraling doubt. Charlie leaned down, resting his forehead against his dog's. "Guess we've got a lot of work ahead of us, huh?" he murmured, feeling a surge of bonding energy between them. Determined, he gathered his notes, seized by the thrill of possibility, yet haunted by the uncertainty still lurking within him. With a resolute spirit, he began to prepare for the next encounter, aware that the lessons from the park would carry into the confrontation that was fast approaching. But what would happen when he finally faced his father? Would he find strength, or would the weight of history pull him back into silence? Charlie pushed himself to find out, aware that overcoming this hurdle would define not just his relationship with his father, but more importantly, the kind of man he was ready to become. Charlie awoke the next morning with an unfamiliar sense of anticipation hanging in the air. The sunlight streamed through the window, bathing the room in warmth. Yet the heaviness of the impending day loomed ever larger in his mind. Every tick of the clock echoed with the importance of the hearing. Today, he would have to confront not just his father, but that part of himself that had long been buried beneath expectations and obligations. Max sensed the tension, pawing at Charlie's leg, as if urging him to refocus. "Okay, buddy," Charlie said, scratching his dog behind the ears. "We need a plan." He grabbed his notebook again, shifting toward the table where thoughts and strategies awaited. The pages were filled with raw emotions, ideas, and fragments of conversations he imagined having with his father. He jotted down points regarding reconciliation, clarity of voice, and the blending of past goodwill with a vision for their futures. "This is for us," he murmured to himself. "For both of us." He spent the morning pacing around his apartment, the energy of purpose thrumming through him. Each step felt like a commitment to his own bravery, and he whispered animated affirmations. "I can do this." He visualized his father sitting across the table, firm, dismissive, but he envisioned equally himself as that steady, assertive man who would not be swayed. As the clock inched closer to the appointment, Charlie felt a unique mix of urgency and dread. Would his father take his words to heart? Would he see the olive branch Charlie was attempting to extend, or merely respond with the same old resistance that characterized their exchanges? The weighty history of their past threatened to overshadow his resolve, and for a moment, doubt crept in. What if he faltered in his efforts? Charlie glanced at Max, who was resting by the front door, unaware of the dramatic shifts happening in Charlie's mind. "You've faced down bigger things than this," he assured himself, forcing a smile. "If Max can face barking dogs at the park, I can face my father." They embarked on their journey to the hearing, the leash firm in Charlie's grip, his heart racing with an animalistic fear and determination. The city unfolded around him in a blur, people going about their lives, purchasing coffees, chatting, carrying out the mundane. Yet none of that mattered to him now. He was on the cusp of a potential liberation. At last, they arrived at the venue, a nondescript building with the stern promise of judgment looming over it. Standing outside, Charlie took a moment to breathe deeply, gathering courage, envisioning success. He recalled the insights from last night, especially his resolve to maintain a balance between respect and independence. Inside, he saw familiar faces, including his father standing rigidly across the room. The anger etched on his father's features struck a chord in Charlie, compelling him to rethink the essence of their interactions. This wasn't merely familial duty. It was about self-definition. As his father caught his eye, Charlie felt a painful pull of nostalgia mixed with a fierce desire to reclaim his narrative. In that electric moment, he recognized the significance of his choice. This was not just a hearing about words. It was the arena where his identity would either be forged or shattered. Steeling himself, Charlie approached the gathering with newfound resolution, ready to speak his truth. As he stepped into the fray, his heart raced with uncertainty, but beneath it all simmered the restless embers of determination. Could he persist against the shadows of their history? Would this be the day he'd sculpt the contours of his independence, or was the weight of expectation too much to bear? With a deep breath, he took the first step toward the podium, the echoes of his past a challenging backdrop, while the promise of potential loomed ahead. Charlie stood at the podium, his heart thundering in his chest. The familiar tension of uncertainty coiled around him, yet within it lay a budding determination. He gazed across the room at the faces watching, some familiar, others strangers, but all bearers of judgment. Here was the moment that would define the path he aimed to forge, a crossroads between his father's past and his own future. For years, I felt like a shadow in my father's world, he began, his voice steady despite the tempest inside. Today, I stand here to reclaim my identity. Each word flowed with intention, steeped in the resolve that had blossomed over the past weeks. He detailed his father's influence on his life, acknowledging the complexities entwined in their relationship. I've faced grief and isolation, he admitted, but I've also unearthed a part of myself that yearned to break free. As he spoke, Charlie felt the air shift, a palpable connection forming between him and the audience. A shared understanding of struggle and resilience enveloped them all. He articulated his decision not just to confront his father's legacy, but to redefine it. I've embraced new passions, taking care of Max, training him, teaching him, and in that process, I've learned how to take care of myself. With each declaration, he began to visualize the journey he had undertaken. Charlie recalled moments spent in the park with Max, broken and hesitant steps that led to empowered strides. Every challenge with Max had mirrored the struggle for his own voice, and reclaiming it was now non-negotiable. This isn't merely about the estate or the past, he asserted, the weight of his words shimmering in the air. This is about acknowledging what has shaped me while asserting that I am capable of something greater. I seek to honor my father's legacy, but I do not wish to be imprisoned by it. His father's expression morphed from steely defiance to a visible battle against resignation. For the first time, Charlie could see the flicker of understanding in his eyes, an acknowledgement that perhaps Charlie wasn't just trying to sever ties, but to build something anew. As he approached the conclusion of his address, an unexpected calm enveloped him. Charlie faced his father directly, willing himself to hold the eye contact as he stated firmly, "I want us to find a way forward. I refuse to be defined by the mistakes of the past. I am ready to engage in this process with honesty and a commitment to healing." The words hung in the air, heavy with both challenge and an olive branch. Moments stretched into a shaky silence as the audience absorbed his message, a collective breath held in anticipation of responses. Charlie felt exposed, yet liberated, unshackled from the past's tight grip. And then, to his astonishment, his father nodded, his expression shifting toward something akin to respect. "Charlie," he began, his voice softer than expected, "I've made my share of mistakes too. Perhaps I've not been the father you wanted, but I want to try being better." With that, a new chapter began for them both, a step toward mutual respect, an explicit commitment to working through the complexities together rather than apart. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it marked a significant transformation. Charlie descended from the podium, a sense of buoyancy enveloping him. He felt empowered, like a phoenix rising from the ashes of the past. Max, waiting faithfully at the door, barked eagerly, as if sensing their victory. Charlie knelt, embracing the dog who had been a constant source of support throughout these challenging times. "We did it, buddy," he whispered, a sense of achievement washing over him. With renewed purpose, Charlie stepped into the future, where uncertainty would still exist but was no longer daunting. The burdens of the past had transformed into opportunities for growth, and now the path ahead glimmered with promise. He had conquered not only a hearing, but his fears, emerging equipped to navigate the complex dynamics of life. "Let's head home," Charlie said to Max, his voice rich with newfound confidence. Each step away from the hearing echoed the close of one chapter and the vibrant start of another, an era defined by honesty, clarity, and the unbreakable bond forged through love and unrelenting hope. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share this. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.